I will step out of the shadow. I will be the one who controls every breath in the room. I will make them listen to me. These words were once spoken by a young man from a poor neighborhood in Hoboken, standing at the threshold of his destiny. His name was Frank Sinatra, and at the time he was just an unknown youth with a homemade microphone and a dream that seemed impossible. Who could have imagined that this boy, surrounded by gray streets, the roar of trains, and the skepticism of those around him, would one day change music forever? Sinatra became more than the voice of an era, he became its symbol. This is the story of how one man not only stepped out of the shadows, but became the light that illuminated the lives of millions. On December 12, 1915, in the heart of the small industrial town of Hoboken, New Jersey, fate had already begun to play by its own rules with Frank Sinatra. Narrow streets, the clamor of factories, and houses pressed tightly against one another formed the first backdrop of his life. In this harsh world where every day was a struggle, a boy was born who would later capture the hearts of millions. But his birth was far from triumphant. Frank entered the world as a large baby, weighing a full 6 kilograms. His mother, Natalie, Dolly Sinatra, nearly died during childbirth, and the infant showed no signs of life for a long time. The doctors, armed with the crude tools of the time, did everything they could to pull him from his mother's womb. Every movement left marks. Scars that remained on his face as a lasting reminder. Life does not come easily. His birth could have been called a miracle were it not from the grim circumstances. By the time little Frank finally cried, someone in the family had already whispered, "He's destined to fight from day one." And it seemed that this prophecy would hold true. The scars on his face were the first reminder that he would have to fight his entire life, against pain, against circumstances, and against himself. In a twist of fate, this boy, born into a world of industrial grayness, would later become the voice of an entire era. But on that day, in a small house on the working-class outskirts, no one could have believed that a child with a damaged face and such a dramatic start in life would one day become a legend. Frank Sinatra was the son of Italian immigrants who brought more than just a Tuscan accent to America. They carried with them an unbreakable spirit. His mother, Natalie, Dolly Sinatra, was a woman impossible to overlook. Petite yet brimming with boundless energy, she quickly became one of the most influential figures in Hoboken. Her determination was evident in everything she did, from supporting the Italian community to playing an active role in local politics. Dolly even ran an underground midwifery practice and always knew how to earn or negotiate the best for her family. Her husband, Marty Sinatra, was her complete opposite. A quiet and reserved firefighter, he dreamed of a simple, stable life. But such a life seemed foreign to his dynamic wife, who yearned for more, greater opportunities, greater recognition. These opposing aspirations often led to family conflicts. Though rare, their arguments would shake the household, filling it with a tension that was impossible to ignore. Frank found himself caught between these two extremes from a young age. His mother a storm, his father a silent shadow. Dolly's strength and ambition inspired the boy, though at times they also overwhelmed him. He struggled with the expectations and demands of this commanding woman. At the same time, his father's quiet presence taught him restraint, even if it sometimes felt like indifference. This familial tension shaped young Frank. From his mother, he absorbed determination and confidence, but he often wondered, what does it mean to be a man? To be as bold as Dolly, or as calm as Marty? Perhaps this early inner conflict became the engine that would later drive him to find his own voice, both on stage and in life. The narrow streets of Hoboken, with their rundown houses and the constant hum of factories, provided a harsh backdrop for Frank Sinatra's childhood. It was a neighborhood where street rules decided your place. You were either strong or you were nothing. The playgrounds were filled with children of factory workers, where gaining respect and attention was a daily struggle. Small and scrawny, with scars on his face, young Frank didn't look like a winner, and the other kids could sense it. "Scarface," they taunted. "Big at birth, but now you can barely stand." These jeers became a regular part of his life. The bullying left marks not just on his face, but on his soul. Sometimes he would come home silent and defeated, feeling like an outsider in his own world. He hated the vulnerability, but used it as fuel. He swore that one day he would prove to everyone that he deserved better. It was on these streets that he learned a crucial lesson. If you wanted to survive, you had to be louder. His voice became his weapon, even if back then it was more about shouting than singing. He developed a sharp tongue, ready to snap back at anyone, even if he trembled inside. His character was being forged, like metal in a furnace. But there was one sanctuary where he could find peace: the radio. It sat in the corner of their small room, and when Frank turned it on, the world around him seemed to disappear. jazz melodies and the smooth voice of Bing Crosby wrapped around him like an old friend who didn't need convincing. In those moments, he forgot about the pain and dreamed of one day singing in a way that people would listen and respect. Music became his refuge, his secret world wherein he wasn't the skinny boy with scars, but someone important. It didn't just comfort him, it gave him hope. Hope that he could escape the playground, that neighborhood, that city. Deep down, he already knew. One day, his voice would be louder than the taunts, and it would be heard not just in Hoboken, but across the entire world. Academics were never Frank Sinatra's strong suit. School, with all its rules and disciplines, couldn't contain a boy who dreamed of something far greater. He didn't excel in grades, but his voice. That was where his true talent shone. At 16, he dropped out of school to sing. A decision that could have ruined his life, instead became the first step toward his destiny. His first stage was the smoky bars and clubs of Hoboken. It was there, in dimly lit rooms filled with the haze of cigarettes, that people began to fall silent when they heard him sing. His voice, brimming with sincerity and emotion, captured attention and made the world fade away. His mother, Dolly, always believed in him. Despite his indifference to academics, she supported his drive to further prove himself through music. Frank didn't just sing for the audience, he sang to justify her faith in him. And deep down, he knew that one day his voice would carry him far beyond these modest stages. In 1935, fate smiled on young Frank Sinatra in the most unexpected way. At an amateur contest in a local theater, he took to the stage with a homemade microphone, pieced together from an old radio, and began to sing. The room fell silent. His voice, though still unpolished, touched the hearts of those listening. Winning this contest became Frank's first real recognition, and the first proof that his dreams were not as far-fetched as they seem. But the road to the top turned out to be much longer than he could have imagined. Frank began performing with local musical ensembles, often for mere pennies. These were nights in smoke-filled halls, singing for small audiences, sometimes without even a microphone. Yet he never complained. He knew that every evening on stage brought him closer to the future he envisioned. In 1939, his life took a dramatic turn. Fortune brought him into contact with Harry James, the renowned bandleader. James saw in Sinatra not just an ambitious young singer, but a diamond waiting to be polished. Sinatra became the lead vocalist for James's band. This marked his first professional contract, and with it came his first real tours, first recordings, and the first taste of fame. Frank was ready to work tirelessly. He spent hours rehearsing, mastering breath control, and learning to command his voice. Life was tough. Endless train rides, hotel stays, and long stretches on the road, but he never regretted it. "I will get out of Hoboken. I'll do it, even if I have to sacrifice everything," he said, and it wasn't an exaggeration. Every night on stage was another step forward, another brick in the foundation of his future career. He understood that talent was only part of the equation. The rest was hard work, determination, and the willingness to keep going, even when it felt like there was nothing left to give. The year 1940 was a turning point in Frank Sinatra's life. That was when he joined Tommy Dorsey's orchestra, one of the most famous big bands of the era. This wasn't just a career move, it was a gateway into the world he had always dreamed of, a step into the elite. Working with Dorsey was a masterclass in musical artistry. With his strict demeanor and impeccable taste, Tommy became a mentor to Sinatra. He taught him how to control his breathing, convey emotions through his voice, and turn each song into a miniature story. Frank absorbed it all like a sponge, and soon his voice stood out even among the other star performers in the orchestra. Audiences were captivated. Sinatra's voice enveloped them like a warm blanket, touching the deepest strings of their hearts. He didn't just sing, he told stories of love, longing, and hope, making each note resonate in the soul. Women were swept off their feet the moment he stepped onto the stage. His idol, Bing Crosby, suddenly became a rival. Frank wasn't just drawing attention, he was inspiring adoration. The song, "I'll Never Smile Again," recorded with Dorsey's orchestra, became Sinatra's first major hit. It topped the charts and stayed there for weeks, while critics hailed him as a rising star capable of eclipsing all others. This was more than success. It was proof that he was no longer just a boy from Hoboken. But fame began to change him. He was no longer the young, modest man dreaming of a stage. He had become a symbol of the era, an object of adoration for thousands. Backstage, he wasn't just surrounded by fellow musicians, but also by producers, reporters, and high society elites. Frank quickly realized that life in the spotlight wasn't just a reward, it was also a trial. Though he was only beginning his journey into the upper echelons of fame, the transformation was undeniable. The boy with the homemade microphone had become a star, lighting up the stage to the sound of rapturous applause. Now he belonged to the world that had once seemed so unattainable. In 1943, Frank Sinatra made a decision that could either elevate him to greatness or erase him from the music industry forever. He severed ties with Tommy Dorsey's orchestra and gambled everything on a solo career. At the time, many considered this move reckless. Big bands were the foundation of the music scene, and few believed Frank could survive without the backing of a powerful orchestra. But Sinatra was convinced the era of large ensembles was fading, and the future belonged to solo artists. His first solo record, released under Columbia Records, included the single Close to You. The song, like his voice, captivated listeners with its intimacy. It felt as if Frank was singing not to an audience, but to each individual listener. He had a rare ability to break down the barriers between the stage and the audience, creating the sensation that his voice was reaching directly into people's hearts. Music critics were slow to acknowledge his talent. Many claimed that without an orchestra, Sinatra would lose his magic, attributing his previous success to Tommy Dorsey rather than Frank himself. But Sinatra had an army of devoted fans, predominantly young women, who stood by him despite this skepticism. They bought his records, filled venues with his solo concerts, and waited in line for hours just to catch a glimpse of their idol. Their unwavering support became a cornerstone of his success. For Frank, this period was a test of resilience. He faced not only critical doubt, but also his own fears, yet he possessed a boldness, an unshakable belief in himself, and an insatiable hunger to prove he could shine on his own. It wasn't just a risk, it was a challenge he had issued to himself. With every performance and every new song, Sinatra won over more hearts. What began as a leap of faith transformed into a resounding triumph. The voice that once filled modest halls in Hoboken was now echoing across America, becoming a symbol of passion, love, and dreams. During World War II, as the world descended into chaos, Frank Sinatra's voice became a beacon of comfort and hope. Though he wasn't on the front lines, his songs reached every corner where the fight raged. Sinatra performed on radio broadcasts, recording musical messages for soldiers, and gave concerts that moved audience to their core. His ballads, such as I'll Be Seeing You, were more than just songs. They were deeply personal messages for those separated by the war. They carried the longing of those left behind and the hope for long-awaited reunions. For soldiers far from home, his voice served as a poignant reminder of what they were fighting for. For women and mothers waiting anxiously for letters from the front, his songs felt like warm notes from the loved ones they yearned to see again. Stories abounded of women listening to Sinatra while holding photos of their loved ones. Newspapers recounted tales of how even the most stoic hearts were brought to tears by his voice. Sinatra became an invisible thread connecting separated families, a reminder that love was stronger than distance or war. Through his music, Frank Sinatra didn't just entertain. He healed, inspired, and gave a nation something to hold on to during its darkest hours. The year 1944 marked the moment Frank Sinatra's name became a cultural phenomenon. His concert at the iconic Paramount Theater in New York City made history not only as a musical event, but as a social sensation. The theater was packed to capacity with fans, yet outside, thousands of young women who couldn't get in screamed, cried, tore at their clothing, and tried to push their way to their idol. This frenzy, dubbed Sinatra mania, took everyone by surprise. No one had ever seen anything like it. It was as if Frank possessed some kind of magic. His voice, stage presence, and heartfelt delivery mesmerized audiences. Women in particular were overwhelmed. To them, he embodied romance and passion. Frank Sinatra became the first performer to generate such hysteria. Before him, there were no stars of this magnitude. The mass adoration he inspired foreshadowed the phenomenon of rock icons like Elvis Presley and the Beatles. He inaugurated a new era, proving that an artist could be more than just a performer. They could become an object of overwhelming admiration and longing. However, this unprecedented success came with its own challenges. Fame of such magnitude brought not only adoration, but also pressure. Yet Frank faced with poise, continuing to do what he did best, singing in a way that made every listener feel each note in every breath. Sinatra Mania was more than just an event. It was proof that Frank Sinatra had rewritten the rules, becoming the first artist to connect millions of people through his music and personal charisma. By the early 1950s, Frank Sinatra's once blazing star began to dim. The big band era that had launched his career had faded into history. New musical genres are capturing the hearts of younger audiences, and for Sinatra, a symbol of the previous era, this was a crushing blow. The setbacks mounted quickly. In 1952, Columbia Records, the label that had propelled him to fame, decided to renew his contract. Record sales plummeted, his songs were played less frequently on the radio, and his concerts no longer drew the packed crowds of years past. For a man accustomed to the roar of applause and the adoration of fans, this indifference from the public was devastating. The world that had once worshipped Frank now turned its back. The press branded him a failure. Critics openly declared that his time was over, and many predicted the end of his career. Sinatra found himself on the brink of disappearing from show business entirely. This period tested not only his career but his character. A man who had once seen his name in lights now faced an uncertain future, haunted by the question, what if this really was the end? Yet within Frank a spark remained. He was too proud to surrender and too talented to vanish without a fight. Frank stood at a crossroad. Even those closest to him doubted his future. But it was in this darkness that the story of his rebirth began. The story of a man who, when confronted with failure, found the strength to prove that true stars never fade away. By 1953, Frank Sinatra's career seemed to have hit rock bottom. The music industry had moved on, his personal life was in shambles, and the glory of his past was fading into memory. Then something happened that would change everything. Sinatra was cast in the film From Here to Eternity. He took on the role of Maggio, a vulnerable yet brash soldier whose complex and dramatic character allowed Sinatra to showcase a new dimension of his talent. The film was a triumph. Sinatra's performance was riveting, revealing unexpected depth and skill. When his name was called as the winner of the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, Frank didn't just return to the spotlight. He reminded the world that true genius cannot be written off. The Oscar wasn't just an award, it was his symbolic emergence from the shadows of obscurity. This success was only the beginning of his second act. In 1954, Sinatra signed with Capitol Records, embarking on a transformative new phase in his musical career. Collaborating with the gifted arranger Nelson Riddle, he began releasing albums that would become timeless classics. His voice, now richer with maturity and deep emotional resonance, took on a new power, infused with pain, passion, and life experience. The album In the Wee Small Hours was a groundbreaking achievement. It was the first concept album in music history, weaving a cohesive emotional narrative of loneliness, longing, and heartbreak. It demonstrated that Sinatra's music had evolved alongside him. From a charming romantic crooner, he'd become an artist capable of conveying the depths of human emotion. Frank Sinatra once again conquered the world, but this time his star shone even brighter. His comeback was a lesson to all. Even when everything seems lost, unwavering belief in oneself can lead back to the top. By the 1950s, Frank Sinatra had cemented his place as one of the greatest performers of his time. His voice, once stifled by the weight of personal and professional crises, now soared with newfound brilliance. Entering a golden era, he delivered immortal hits like I've Got You Under My Skin, Fly Me to the Moon, and the iconic My Way. Each song became more than a musical composition. It was a testament to who Sinatra was. His voice wrapped around listeners, reaching the deepest corners of their souls and transforming every performance into an intimate experience. Sinatra wasn't just a singer. He was a man whose music captured love, desire, melancholy, and triumphed with unparalleled authenticity. By the 1950s, Sinatra had transcended the role of a performer to become a cultural icon. His style, demeanor, and charisma set trends and inspired admiration. Men emulated his impeccable suits, signature hats, and effortless confidence. Women swooned over him. He embodied an era filled with romance, ambition, and unrelenting energy. Yet behind every success lay a story of struggle. Sinatra understood the cost of triumph. His career had teetered on the edge of collapse more than once, yet he had repeatedly proven that determination, passion, and talent could overcome any obstacle. My Way became the anthem of his life. The song was a declaration from a man who not only survived but lived entirely on his own terms, embracing every high and low. For Sinatra, music was not just a career, it was his essence. Every note, every lyric reflected his soul and his insatiable hunger for life. The love story of Frank Sinatra and Nancy Barbato began in humble circumstances when he was an unknown man from Hoboken. They met in the late 1930s and their connection was instant. Nancy, with her gentle nature and steadfast loyalty, became the one who believed in Frank even when he doubted his own dreams. In 1939, they married, embarking on a life together filled with hope and ambition. The early years of their marriage were challenging, but marked by closeness and love. Nancy stood by him at every step of his journey. She was there when Frank performed in small clubs, barely making ends meet, and when he first stepped into the stages of larger venues. During those times, they lived modestly, but their emotional bond was strong. The couple had 3 children, Nancy Jr., Frank Jr., and Tina. Despite his demanding career, Sinatra tried to be a loving father. He brought home gifts from his tours, read bedtime stories, and did his best to make up for his frequent absences. However, his work consumed more and more of his time, and his presence at home became increasingly rare. As Sinatra's fame grew, so did the strain on their marriage. His celebrity status attracted the attention of women, and rumors of his affairs became harder to ignore. Nancy endured the public scandals for years, hoping that the love they had forged during their earlier struggles could withstand the pressure of his stardom. In 1951, however, their marriage came to an end. Nancy could no longer overlook his infidelities, and Frank, caught up in the whirlwind of his rising fame, found himself unable to preserve what they had built together. After his separation from Nancy Barbato in 1951, Frank Sinatra became entangled in a whirlwind romance that was impossible to contain. The center of that storm was Ava Gardner, a Hollywood icon renowned for her stunning beauty, fiery personality, and fierce independence. Their affair, which began before Frank's divorce was finalized, became a media sensation and one of the most talked about love stories of its time. Their love was tumultuous, passionate, and ultimately destructive. Both were strong-willed individuals, too volatile to coexist peacefully. On one hand, Ava inspired Frank and supported him during one of the darkest periods of his life, when his career was faltering. She believed in his talent, and in some ways may have saved him from complete ruin. On the other hand, their relationship was riddled with jealousy, alcohol, and endless arguments. Ava's magnetic charisma could elicit both adoration and fury in Sinatra. Their evenings together often ended in fiery quarrels, which quickly became fodder for tabloid headlines. Ava called Frank her crazy Italian, and he declared that life without her was meaningless. Their love was too intense, too consuming to last. By 1957, their marriage ended in divorce. The breakup marked not only the end of their relationship, but the closing of a significant chapter in both of their lives. They left behind a trail of rumors, heartache, and most significantly, their own shattered hearts. Despite the arguments and the eventual divorce, Ava remained a permanent fixture in Sinatra's heart. He never forgot her, and many of his most emotional songs from that period reflect the pain he endured after their separation. In the early 1960s, Frank Sinatra's life was once again engulfed in scandal. This time it wasn't just his penchant for glamorous women that made headlines, but also his dangerous associations. His affair with Judith Campbell, a dazzling socialite, became one of the most mysterious and widely discussed chapters of his biography. Judith was no ordinary lover. Her name was linked to mob boss Sam Giassana, one of the most powerful figures in organized crime at the time. These relationships intertwined with another critical aspect of Sinatra's life, his friendship with President John F. Kennedy. As a vocal supporter of Kennedy's campaign, Frank facilitated meetings between Judith and the president, acting as a go-between. Rumors about Sinatra's connection to the mafia flared anew. The press and intelligence agencies closely monitored his activities, questioning just how deep Sinatra's involvement in criminal circles went. His extravagant parties at his own hotels and his close relationship with Giansana became fertile ground for endless speculation. The affair put Sinatra's reputation at serious risk. His name was no longer just synonymous with music and film, but also with political and criminal intrigue. Even his friendship with Kennedy suffered as the president began to distance himself from Frank to avoid any association with the mob, a move that deeply hurt Sinatra. This chapter in Sinatra's life only amplified his image as a scandalous figure, a man who lived on the edge. His life resembled a noir film, where the protagonist is always drawn into dangerous games from which escape is difficult. Yet, even amid this whirlwind of intrigue, Frank remained true to himself, bold, charismatic, and unflinching in the face of challenges. In 1966, Frank Sinatra found himself in the spotlight once again, thanks to his unexpected and sensational marriage to the young actress Mia Farrow. He was 50, she was just 21, and the nearly 3-decade age gap became a hot topic in the press. Many wondered what could possibly unite the legendary crooner and the rising Hollywood star. For Sinatra, the marriage seemed like a chance to rediscover a sense of vitality. After his tumultuous relationship with Ava Gardner and a string of affairs, he may have seen Mia in a way to recapture his youth. With her delicate beauty and refined demeanor, she was a stark contrast to his previous lovers. But behind their outward harmony lay deep differences. Mia, brimming with energy and ambition, was focused on her career. She sought challenging roles that would establish her as a serious actress and had no intention of slowing down for a traditional family life. Sinatra, on the other hand, yearned for stability and domestic comfort, something he had long been without. He envisioned Mia as a supportive partner who would share his later years, while she was determined to chart her own path to success. Their union was short-lived. Divergent views on life, interests, and priorities quickly led to their separation. In 1968, just 2 years after their wedding, they divorced. Despite the brevity of their marriage, Frank and Mia managed to maintain a warm relationship. Sinatra remained a friend and a supportive figure for Mia, ready to help when she needed it. Their bond, though brief as husband and wife, endured in its own unique way, standing as a testament to the affection they still shared. After decades of tumultuous relationships, scandals, and attempts to balance love with life in the public eye, Frank Sinatra finally found peace in his marriage to Barbara Marx. In 1976, he married her, the widow of Zeppo Marx, and this union became the final and most stable chapter of his love life. Barbara brought something into Frank's life that he'd always lacked: calm and certainty. She asked for nothing more than his love and attention. Instead of the fiery passions that had defined his earlier relationships, this marriage offered comfort and a sense of security. Barbara became his steadfast companion through the twilight of his life, sharing in the joys of his later creativity and the challenges of his declining health. Barbara stood by him as his career began to wind down and his energy and resilience waned. She not only provided emotional support, but also managed practical matters, shielding him from unnecessary stress. Frank referred to her as his quiet harbor, a person with whom he could finally feel at home. Their marriage lasted until Frank's death in 1998. Barbara stayed by his side to the very end, surrounding him with care and love. After a lifetime spent under the spotlight, Frank found in her a partner who helped him face his final years with dignity and warmth. This marriage symbolized the conclusion of a long journey marked by highs and lows. After enduring so many trials, Sinatra finally found what he'd been searching for, a love that needed no validation, and a peace unshaken by storms. Barbara Marx became the person who gave him the chance to embrace old age with a sense of tranquility and fulfillment. In 1971, at the height of his career, Frank Sinatra did the unthinkable. He announced his retirement. For his fans, it was a shocking revelation. Sinatra wasn't just a singer, he was a symbol of an entire era. His departure felt inconceivable, as if the world of music itself was losing one of its greatest champions. But Frank couldn't stay away for long. Just 2 years later, he returned with concerts and new albums. He admitted he couldn't live without the stage, without the audience for whom his voice was a lifeline. His comeback was triumphant, and for a time it seemed Sinatra had reclaimed his place into the spotlight. However, the years inevitably took their toll. By the 1980s, Sinatra's performances became less frequent, and the challenges he faced behind the scenes grew harder to hide. Memory lapses occasionally caused him to forget the lyrics of songs he had sung for decades. His voice, once his most powerful gift, no longer carried the same strength and resonance. These changes weighed heavily on Frank. He understood that his audience expected nothing less than perfection and feared tarnishing the image of the unparalleled artist they adored. Yet the stage remained his sanctuary and his passion. Even as his body and voice betrayed him, he kept performing, determined to give his fans even a glimpse of the greatness they cherished. His fight to maintain his legendary status, even as time became his adversary, was both poignant and heroic. Frank refused to give up, battling to the very end to keep his music alive. For him, the stage wasn't just a place to perform, it was where he truly lived. By the 1990s, the toll of Frank Sinatra's extraordinary life was undeniable. Decades of relentless touring, stress, alcohol, and cigarettes had left their mark. He suffered from heart failure, diabetes, and early signs of dementia. His legendary energy had diminished, but his spirit remained unbroken. In 1995, despite his declining health, Sinatra decided to give a farewell performance. The event was both painful and poignant. He could barely stand, but his mere presence on stage elicited thunderous applause. Every gesture, every word reminded the audience of the greatness that had once captivated millions. That final concert was a testament to his resilience. Even in the face of physical frailty, Sinatra remained a fighter who couldn't simply fade into silence. The stage was his home, the place where he felt most alive, right until the end. Though his body grew weaker, his heart remained strong. That last performance was his farewell to the world that he had once dominated with his voice and charisma. To his audience, Frank Sinatra would forever be remembered as the legendary performer who lived for music and for the people who loved it. In his final years, Frank Sinatra lived a quiet, secluded life, far from the bright lights of the stage and the flash of cameras. His Beverly Hills home became a peaceful retreat where he spent his days surrounded by family and his closest friends. After decades in the public eye, Sinatra finally found solace, though his health continued to decline. On May 14, 1998, the world said goodbye to a legend. Sinatra passed away from a heart attack at the age of 82. In his hospital room, his final love, Barbara Marx, was by his side, holding his hand. His last words were poignant, "I'm losing." Even in his final moments, Sinatra remained a fighter, though he understood that his battle had reached its conclusion. Frank Sinatra's death marked the end of an era. His passing left a void in the hearts of millions of fans worldwide. To many, he was more than just a singer or an actor. He was a symbol of dreams, resilience, and an unrelenting spirit. His music lived on, an eternal reminder of a man unafraid to live life to its fullest.